Hello, Chad Camp here, your designated broker for Exit Realty Coana. Wanted to make a quick video about a buyer timeline. Um, so if you're new as a realtor and you hear somebody say, "Hey, I'm thinking about buying a house," well, these are some steps that you're going to need to know and to take, along with just some thoughts on how to deal with them and what you need to do. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. So I've got a timeline that I created right here. First thing you want to do is find out if that buyer has been pre-qualified. So in other words, what you want to do is say, hey, look, have you spoken with a lender and confirmed you have the ability to actually buy a house? There's two components to a buyer. That's one that is able, and the other part is willing, right? So you've got the buyer that's willing, but are they able? So the first thing to do is to make sure that they're able to. One question you don't need to ask is, are you going to need financing or are you paying cash? If they're saying they're paying cash, obviously they're able. If they say they need to get a loan, they may or may not be able. We need to figure that out. So the first thing you're going to want to do is refer them to a trusted lender. Now, in the RC Center, the Resource Center, and Exit, in the Office tab, I do have several of my trusted preferred lenders that I've used for well over 10 years and 15 years even for two of them. So there's some good qualified lenders that are going to be able to help them out. Secondly, you're going to need to find out about their down payment. If they're a first-time home buyer, they might need an FHA loan, which is going to need 3.5% down. For somebody that is seasoned, has bought some properties, they may be able to qualify conventional, or someone that has a strong credit score and great work history. So they might be able to get a 3% down loan conventional or 5%. Now that's currently, those down payment requirements do change. So this recording is done in May of 23. So just check with your lender. Send them over to the lender. The lender is going to have them go through the pre-qualification process. They'll submit a partial loan application. The lender will then try and gather as much information from that buyer as possible. So they'll be checking for wages, pay stubs, things of that nature. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. I want to be able to see kind of what I'm saying and doing here, but also want to have access to that buyer's timeline for you. Now, next thing you'll want to do is, once they get through that pre-qualification process, I would not put them in your car or show them properties. If I do that, it's a one and done deal until they go through that pre-qualification process. Sometimes folks just need to see what's on the market to see whether it's worth their time to go through that process or not. I wouldn't dedicate a whole lot of time until you confirm that they're able and are willing. So the next thing you'll want to do is, once you get through that pre-qualification process, the lender's going to go ahead and send you a pre-qual letter. Make sure you contact them to find out all the terms, see if they need help with seller concessions with the down payment, or if they're going to be going through a down payment assistance program. But have that discussion with the lender before you go out, so you get a better understanding of what the buyer's needs are from a lending perspective. Now, on average, you're going to show about 10 homes before they want to submit an offer. Now, your D and I personality types are generally less than this, and your S and Cs are a little bit higher. So as we cover in Flex training, the different personality types and how to gear your sales perspective or approach to them will tell you kind of where they're going to fall. So when you're talking to them, from a financial perspective, you want to tell them on the front end, there's going to be some fees that they're going to have to be ready to cover out of pocket on the front end. The first thing is going to be the earnest deposit. We'll cover that here in a second. The second thing is the appraisal fee, as well as a home inspection fee. But we'll get into that here in just a second. But from a time frame perspective, it could take you a little bit of time, depending on the buyer's schedule, to get out there and find a home to write an offer. Now, when it's time to write an offer, generally allow yourself 2 to 3 days for the contract to be submitted and for any response. If you're going to do it on the weekends, it's not uncommon for the listing agents to hold the contracts until Monday to respond. So keep that in mind when you write the offer. The best thing you want to do, what I would highly recommend, is you contact that listing agent, find out how they're going to be dealing with the offers. Number one. Number two, if it's a competitive market from, if it's a seller's market, you also want to find out if there's any requirements or items that you can take into consideration when writing your offer. That would be how quickly they can close. So if they're living in the home, do they need 4, 5, 6 weeks to move out, or are they looking for a quick close? As well as if there's anything in the listing that they want to go ahead and convey or not convey with the house. So anything that the listing agent can tell you to give yourself a better opportunity to write a contract that is going to put your buyer in the best position to be able to be accepted, right? So obviously you want to find out if they have other offers as well. So most times the agents are not going to tell you if they've got an offer as far as the details of that offer. They'll say that they've got one in hand. But if they typically won't tell you what that offer is. My perspective is my job is to get the highest and most amount of money for my client when I list a home. I typically, unless if they're a super low ball, the verbiage I'll use when I've got a low ball offer in hand, when someone calls and says, hey, do you have any offers? My standard response is, I've got an offer, but it's not where we'd like to see it. At this moment, I'm not allowed to convey what that is, okay? If you've got multiple offers and you're over asking price, now's the time to start driving people up. Say, well, this is where I'm at. The house on the market for 300. I've got an offer for 310. No concessions. They're not asking for an appraisal. It's a very clean offer. They're not asking for much. So you'll want to go ahead and convey that to them, because then they can come in and beat that 310. So it's called shopping out your contract. So you definitely want to do that when you're at or above the listing price, or at least it's highly recommended. Obviously, the seller is going to be the one to direct you, but they generally direct you off of what you recommend to them if you're a professional. So negotiation is going to take anywhere between 2 to 3 business days to accomplish. So now within 24 hours of acceptance, this is where the first money needs to be prepared by the buyer to come out of their bank account. And it's going to be the earnest deposit. Earnest deposit ranges as far as price is concerned. It can be, these days it's $1,500, is pretty standard, up to 1%, 2% of the purchase price. If you have multiple offers in hand, or if that seller has multiple offers in hand, the more money you put down, the more money the buyer puts at risk. You're going to get a little bit better chance of them going with you, as well as the purchase price, obviously. So that's going to be your first thing. You're going to need to get that to title company within 24 hours. Now, here's the thing. If you work with a title company, just call them up. Once the contract's accepted, you want to email that contract to the lender, and you're going to email that contract to the title company as well. So once that happens, they'll be able to open escrow, and the lender will be able to start the loan process, get that file moving forward. Title, I would direct them, hey, here's the buyer's contact information, because when you send that contract over, they're going to need contact information for the buyer, include name, email address, phone number, any pertinent details about that, who is their best person to contact, and if a particular time is needed to accommodate a buyer's employment status. So just keep that in mind. Now, during this first 10 days, it's going to be a very busy first 10 days for you and the buyer. So prepare them that within 3 days, they're supposed to receive the seller property disclosure statement from the seller. Now, if it's uploaded in the MLS, just download it at the time of the offer, if it's in there, and make sure that you send that over to the buyer for them to review and initial and sign. Now, when they're initialing and signing it, all they're doing is acknowledging receipt. They're not saying, hey, we accept the property, okay? So that's a misconception that buyers will have by signing the SPUDs. So That's the first thing that you'll get within 3 business days, or within, not business days, it's within 3 calendar days. The next thing that the seller is supposed to provide within the first 5 days of being under contract. Now, remember, day 1 is always tomorrow. So if you get a contract accepted on the 10th, they have until the 13th to get you the spuds. They have until the 15th to get you the insurance claims history. Now, that insurance claims history is supposed to be for the prior 5 years. Now, there is a provision if they're not going to be able to meet that deadline where the seller can just stipulate in writing whether there's been any claims or not. So that does satisfy the contract. Obviously, that's not what we want to see. We want to actually see something from the insurance company. It's that trust but verify mentality. So just be sure that you try and protect your client's interest, and get that insurance claims history from that other agent. So that's going to be coming in. Now, interesting to note, on the spuds, once they send that to you, they have 3 days. You only have 5 days after receipt of that spuds to reject the property, cancel the escrow, due to what's found in the spuds. You have 5 days after the insurance claims history comes in as well to cancel due to the insurance claims history. Okay, so that's outside of the 10-day inspection period. So if they don't get you the spuds, until day 7, well, you got an additional 2 days to cancel contract and retain your buyer's earnest deposit. Not a lot of folks, understand how that works, because they think the only time you can back out of a contract is during the inspection period. But those are just some finer details of the contract to keep in mind. All right, so now within your first 10 days, another component that is going to cost the buyer money is a home inspection. Most home inspections are going to be in direct relation to the square footage of the home. If you just, a good rule of thumb right now in May of 2023, inflation is that $500 is going to cover the home inspection as well as the termite. Now, I also have an inspector that I use. Depending on the size of the home, I doubt you'll spend $400. But just prepare them for 500. It's under promise and over deliver is my philosophy. So that way, whenever they come in and the home inspections, only 400 or 385, they were prepared to spend 500. They're happy. They save some money. So just a little strategy there. But you also want to just always prepare your buyers for worst case scenario. It'll make your life a whole lot easier in the long run. So then you'll have your home inspection. What I would recommend is that you show up at the end of the home inspection. So ask the inspector, hey, what time do you want me and the buyer to show up? Generally, that's when the home inspector will obtain payment, typically, either a credit card or a check. Check with him first how he'll accept payment, and then convey that to the buyer along with his quote for the home inspection. So you've got the home inspection. You've got that completed. So you've got 10 days from going under contract to get the BINSR over to the seller. Now, this is also the time when you're going to be looking at the appraisal. So if that inspection report comes back and you ask your seller or your buyer, are there any deal killers in this? And they say, no, we're going to ask for some repairs, but if they do them, great. If they don't, that's fine too. At that point in time, say, okay, we'll get with the lender and tell them to order the appraisal. Also have a discussion with the lender, have the buyer have a discussion with the lender on whether they should lock their loan at this point in time as well, because presumably they're not going to cancel the contract. So them spending money on an appraisal is kind of a foregone conclusion that it's going to occur. And so then the lender can go ahead and order that appraisal as well. That typically happens within the first 10 days. Now, that cost can come up to about $800 depending on how busy appraisers are. We're in May of 23, and I just had a rush appraisal that was done for $625. Whereas a year and a half ago, I had appraisals that weren't being rushed. They were taking forever to come back, and they were charging up to $800. So just err on the side of caution. Also let your lender be on the hook for how much that's going to be. So, if they say, it's only going to be 600, say, well, I understand the lender said only 600, but let's just prepare for 800. And if it comes in less, then at least you're prepared from a financial perspective to meet that need. Okay, so on day 10, on or about day 10, you need to send the BINSR over to the seller's agent, right? So when you go through the inspection report, do not make any issues that aren't issues. It doesn't matter what you have an issue with. It matters what your buyer has issues with. Those are your priorities. You're going to have some buyers that have this laundry list of items, and then you're going to have other buyers that are going to have just one or two items. With those buyers that have the laundry list item, you need to have a conversation with them depending on what the market is. If it's a seller's market, you know, the likelihood of a seller doing a laundry list of items is going to be low. Okay. So you know, you can have a discussion with them, say, look, we can ask for all these items, be prepared for them to tell us just to take a hike. You know, and they're going to have a conversation with the listing agent. You want to communicate with them all along to find out how likely the seller would be with regards to doing repairs. Okay. Now, I will say this, with someone that's wanting to come in with a long laundry list of items, it's always better to get a credit, seller credit in lieu of repairs, because that buyer is going to be very picky whenever those repairs are done. So to save yourself and your buyer problems at the end of the deal, ask for a seller credit, which means you're going to have contractors out to give you bids, or at least contact a contractor or handyman and say, hey, look, how much would you charge to do this? So just keep that in mind with someone who's got this, you know, long list of items that they want repaired. They're going to be very finicky as to how that is done. The contract stipulates that the work only needs to be done in a workmanlike manner, but that definition varies from buyer to buyer. So just to kind of make it easier on yourself, say, look, Mr. Buyer, we'll ask for a credit, and then that way you can hire who you want to hire, and they have to answer directly to you as to whether that job was done to your satisfaction or not. And whenever you put it like that, most buyers are like, yeah, I want them responsible for me. I don't want them responsible for the prior owner, you know, for the seller, because once we close on the deal, you know, I'm going to call them up there and like, well, who are you? You didn't pay me. I did the job and they said it was fine. We're good to go. So that's a good way to deal with buyers that are going to be a little, those are your C buyers, by the way. That's going to be very picky, for lack of a better term. Probably not the best term to use, but you know, they know what they want and they want what they want, right? So as far as that's concerned, you know, once you submit that request, the seller has 5 days to respond. Now they can respond in one of three, that's four. I went to Chandler High, so I apologize. So they can respond in one of three ways. One is, yes, we're going to do everything. Two is, no, we're not doing anything. Or three, okay, we'll do a couple of those things. So if they come back and they say, yes, we're going to do everything on there, your inspection period is over. Okay. Your buyer cannot get his earnest deposit back and can't cancel it. Well, they can cancel the contract, but they're not going to get the earnest deposit back. If they say, no, we're not going to do anything, well, now you have 5 days to determine whether that buyer is going to go ahead and proceed with the contract or not, right? So you can cancel. Do not miss these deadlines. If the buyer wants to cancel and you don't get that notice over to them and the title company within 5 days, more than likely you're going to owe the buyer personally their earnest deposit, because they're going to lose it. Do not miss this deadline. So now let's just say that the seller says, look, we'll do a couple of those items. Well, at that point in time, you can have a discussion with your buyer as to whether that's acceptable or not. If it's not, pick up the phone. This isn't time to renegotiate price. Technically, legally, happens all the time though. Pick up the phone, call the listing agent and say, hey, look, these items are a problem. How can, you know, what is your seller willing to do to kind of help accommodate, you know, my buyer? And then lay out your claims or your position, if you will, to support what your buyer is why they're wanting those repairs. So typically you can come to a meeting of the minds verbally and then say, okay, fine, we'll do an addendum along those lines. Now, if you are asking for a credit in the BINSR, make sure that you stipulate in lieu of the below item repairs, seller to credit buyer 500, see addendum, let's call it addendum 1. Then you draft an addendum up that you're going to send along the same time the BINSR, the same time you ask for repairs, the repair request, you're going to do an addendum, say, and now just stipulate seller to credit buyer X amount of dollars, period. Don't make reference to repairs. Your lender's not going to want to see any repairs being referred to in the contract. So, I mean, talk to your lender just to confirm that, but 9 times out of 10, the underwriter's not going to want to see that in the contract. So once you send that over, right, and they sign that addendum, then they're locked into that credit. But have that discussion if you're having problems, if the buyer is having problems with the seller's response, okay, with that listing agent. So you'll be surprised what you guys are able to come up with from a solution perspective. Think outside the box. If you have problems thinking outside the box, call me and I'll help you try and come up with a solution that's going to keep the deal alive. Because the seller wants to sell the house and close, buyer wants to buy the house and close. So does the listing agent. So do you. Now, if it's in the buyer's best interest not to, then that's a tough conversation. You're going to have to swallow your needs, your wants, and you're going to have to advise the buyer accordingly. So always be honest with the buyer. Now over to the buyer that's like, hey, I only want 1 or 2 items, and you think that there are other items that are important to you, include those. Okay, have that discussion with the buyer. Say, hey, I want to include these because we're not asking for a whole lot. I think it's reasonable and fair for these items to be corrected. Okay, now that's going to tell your buyer, hey, you're looking out for them. Okay, so don't be afraid to do that either. So if you think, I just closed a deal last week, actually, no, it was yesterday. This was yesterday's deal. I closed a deal yesterday where the buyer said, hey, we're going to take the property as is. There was, I think, 19 other offers on the home. We were the winning bid. And the reason we won that is because I made phone calls to the listing agent. I built a rapport with them. I let them know we were going to be easy to work with. I let them know my lender was going to be easy to work with as well, and had my lender reach out to the listing agent to be proactive and say, look, these buyers are great buyers. Okay. They're very solid. So whatever you can do to show that you are a professional and that you are going to make the escrow for the listing agent as easy as possible when it's a seller's market, by all means do that. Okay. Your buyers will thank you for it, and let them know that you are building a rapport with them as well. So anyway, back to the repair request. With this escrow, they came to me and they said, we don't ask for anything because they're all minor. And so I said, well, you know what? I think we can get some money out of them. Okay. So we had a discussion. I said, let me just cherry pick some items off of the inspection report and say that we take issue with them. And then I'm going to ask for a $750 credit. That way, that will help you whenever it comes time to make some of those repairs that's on the inspection report. Well, I had conversations all along with the listing agent, and I had a phone call that was done a day or two before, and they said, hey, are you guys sending a laundry list over? We'll do some repairs, but we're not going to do everything on the inspection report. When that inspection report comes in, you email that to the listing agent. First off, the contract dictates that happens. Okay, so don't wait to send your repair request over. Send that over and let them sit and mull and think about everything that's in that report to freak them out, right? And so then you come in with what you ask for. Hopefully it's not as bad as what they're imagining. And then you can make get some credits for your buyers potentially. And now on the other side of the coin, from the listing agent perspective, they send that over. Honestly, I don't even look at it. I don't care about it. If my seller says, hey, look, I want to see it, I'll say, look, I'll send it to you because it's due you, but think about this. They're sending this over so they can prep you for repairs. They're trying to freak you out. The less we know at this point in time, the better off we are, because at this stage of the game, for us to worry about something that hasn't happened yet just adds stress to us. Now, if you want to see it, by all means, I'll send it to you, right? But put that in their mind that, hey, look, I don't want you guys stressing over something that may or may not be an issue. Let's cross that bridge when we get there. So that way you're protecting your seller, and then you're also putting them in a position to whenever we do get the repair request, we're getting raw emotions, initial raw emotions, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But they're not already ready to move for the buyer. Okay, so that's just on the flip side. That was free. That wasn't in my notes. So anyway, so once the vendor is sent, the seller has 5 days to respond. Once they respond within that 5 days, then we have 5 days to respond. Let's just say that the seller never responds to our repair requests. So day 6 comes and we haven't heard a peep. That's as if they're telling us we're not doing anything. Okay. So after day 5, now you have another 5 calendar days to respond to them, whether you're going to cancel or not. So keep that in mind. Now, day 6, you call them and say, hey, look, were you sending were you going to be sending a response to our repair request or not? Right. And so at that point in time, oh man, I forgot to send that. Send it along. We'll honor your response. Now, if you forget to send the repair request over, big no-no, right? So make sure you send that repair request over. If you miss day 10 and you go into day 11, that seller does not have to even look at that BINSR, right? The repair request, because you're telling them, I'm accepting the property in its current conditions by your silence. Okay. So you don't send the BINSR over, you're being silent on the matter. And they're saying, I'm taking the property. Do not miss that BINSR deadline, unless, of course, the buyer is going to accept the property in its current condition, not ask for repairs. You always want to ask for something. Okay, you're not doing your buyer any favors by accepting the property in its current condition, unless if the buyer's like, look, you tell them that and you make a promise to them, we're not getting to the listing agent that we're not going to ask the sellers for anything. Well, then follow your word, right? But then also you can always say, well, there's something on the repair request that we weren't anticipating, to kind of get out of that. Anyway. All right. So now we've got through the repair request. We've agreed to repairs. During this whole time, if there's an HOA involved, the title company is going to be sending out CC&Rs, codes, covenants, and restrictions. So once those get out, you have 5 days. The buyer has 5 days to either accept or reject. Give me one moment. I'm going to pause this because I've got someone coming right in. Hello, Governor. Yep. All right, thanks. I'm going. All right, I am sorry about that. Sorry, I had a delivery. Anyway, so you have 5 days from the CC&Rs to accept or reject them. Reject means I'm canceling the contract and we're not going to close the deal. Now, once you get all your disclosures out of the way, at that point in time, the lender's doing what they need to do. The buyer needs to correspond with the lender to ensure that everything the lender is asking for has been given. You're going to be in touch with the lender periodically to say, hey, how things are going. Actually, I just realized there's one deadline missing on here. When the BINSR is over, you need to have your lender provide an LSU, a loan status update. So that's in the contract. So you need to get that over to the listing agent, showing them the process of the loan. Now, if you miss this, the way that they're supposed to deal with it is send over a cure notice. Then you have 3 days to get that over to them. But it's always best to be proactive, to let that listing agent know you're a professional, you're making sure all the deadlines are being met, and going from there. But sometimes it happens, right? But if you've got a good lender, that lender is going to be sending out updates, once a week, every week to 10 days anyway. So that's why it's important to have a good lender. Okay, so now the lender's doing his thing. We're waiting for the appraisal to be returned. Now, if the appraisal comes back and you're at or above list price, that's perfect. The other question you want to know is, even if the appraisal comes in at the purchase price, are there any conditions? Conditions means, are there any repairs that the lender or the appraiser is requiring to be done for that lender to loan the money? Okay. Conventional loans doesn't happen often. FHA, the biggest issue that I typically see on FHA's conditions are going to be flaking paint on the underside of the eaves or on the edge of the board there on the house. Can't think of the name of it right now. Anyway, where the roofing meets. So if there's flaking paint, that could be an issue. The eaves. So anyway, the appraisal comes in if it's below value. Now you're going to have a couple of days if the appraisal comes in low to try and renegotiate the purchase price, try and come up with a solution. You need to make sure that you do not miss that deadline for the appraisal contingency if it comes in short. Okay. And I'm drawing a blank on the number of days. I think it's 3 or 5 days. I think it's 3 days that you got to respond. When in doubt, read the contract, right? So anyway, you need to make sure you do that in writing. Now, just because the lender sends an email, yeah, you have 3 days to cancel. It's down here. So just because the lender sends an email doesn't mean notice has been given or directions have been given to title and or the listing agent that you're canceling that contract. Got to remember, the lender is not licensed to act on behalf of the buyer. You are. Okay. I had to deal with a buyer. I had a listing. Buyer's agent was a real jerk. And the buyer was a real jerk too, let's be honest. But they were very difficult. Let me put it that way. I shouldn't say they were a jerk. They were very extremely difficult, very entitled. Long story short, buyer can't qualify. The lender sends an email. Well, the title company reached out to the buyer saying, hey, what are we doing? I sent a cure notice because loan documents weren't out to the title company 3 days prior, which is our next deadline, prior to closing. So we didn't close. The agent just went MIA, didn't respond. So then when our cure notice was expired, I stayed up till midnight 01, so 12:01 in the morning on day 4, because the cure notice, you got to give them 3 days. Day 4, I sent an email to title saying, we are electing to cancel this contract due to them not curing or due to them not fixing the cure. Give us the earnest deposit. Then that's when the agent said, no, we canceled, the lender canceled. So I had a discussion with title and I sent this over in writing saying, nope, a lender is not licensed to act on behalf of the buyer. Only the buyer's agent is. The buyer's agent and the buyer have to give directions, not some third party. Long story short, we got the earnest deposit. So, and the nice thing about that is the listing agent, part of the listing contract, make sure you cover that with them as well, is there's just one sentence about it, I think. But the listing agent, the listing broker gets 50% of that, and then it goes to whatever your split is. So just be mindful of that. So your lender has to have loan documents to title 3 days prior to closing. So you need to make sure that the closing disclosure for the loan gets out in a timely fashion as well, so they can get loan docs to the title company. Once those loan docs are a title company, title, reach out to title and say, be sure to include me whenever the buyer is scheduled to sign. I would highly recommend you as a buyer's agent attend your buyer's closings. It reassures them that you are there for them. Okay. It also gives you a great opportunity to celebrate with them on this process you've gone through. It's a perfect time to say, look, I appreciate you working with me. My business is, 90%, 100% referral only. You are the lifeblood of my business. Is there anyone that you know of that's thinking about buying or selling a home? Okay. Another thing you can do, and this is other trainings, is say, hey, look, when are you moving? I'll bring pizza by for you and your movers. That gets you in front of their friends and their family, showing that you're the realtor. You show up with pizza on moving day, you're going to be their best buds. Another thing to do real quick, I'm getting off topic, but is ask them for a mailing list, and you'll send mailers out to their friends and family, notifying them that they bought a house and that they're moving. So just some quick marketing tips at closing. But anyway, At that point in time, also, you'll be looking at, you get loan docs 3 days prior. You'll also be looking at doing a final walkthrough of the house just to make sure that the home is in relatively the same condition as when the buyer agreed to purchase it, as well as looking to see if those repairs were made that everyone's agreed to. Now, and the vendor, they're supposed to provide you with invoices and proof that those repairs were done 3 days prior to closing. I would not adjust that, to allow the seller more time to make those repairs, because we want to make sure they're done for our walkthrough and beforehand. And if they're not, then we can deal with the seller credit last minute to repair anything that's not taken care of. So anyway, just some things to deal with on your buyers. I hope this was helpful. If you need anything, feel free to reach out. And hey, happy home selling, guys. All right. Have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.